Hey guys, thanks for joining us again. Thanks for coming back. Really appreciate it. When you get a minute, please like and subscribe to the videos and make comments. We want to hear what you have to say. Want to hear what you like, what you don't like, and I'll respond to those, and that might help direct a future video. So I'm very, very happy today to have a longtime friend who I think I've known for, oh gosh, probably close to 40 years.
I think
When we
so.
were young and stupid. Now we're just old and stupid. But I've known for a long, long time, and he's in another state, which is why we're zooming this one. So just to introduce you to Tim Gallic. And Tim, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about who you are, where you're from, why I'm talking to you today.
Absolutely. Well, first off, thanks, Rob, for the invite. It was nice to chat with you. Nice to do it through Zoom because I can actually see you face to face. As opposed to the way we normally do it, which is I drive down the road with a approved device in my
Right.
ear.
Correct. Approved.
Talking, I've been an educator for 30 some odd years. I've been running Catholic schools across the country for the last 15. I'm the fourth of 10 children, and
Wow.
I'm the fourth of 8 boys. So I've
Wow.
been surrounded by this, and I've been a lifelong Catholic. It's the great joy of my life to
Amen.
know that I follow Jesus Christ in his church. And it's been a great experience. I've probably, at this point, have seen more of the country and more Catholic education than most people ever would want to. Uh, so it'd be nice to chat about it and talk about kind of what's going on.
Awesome. That's great. Well, Tim, like I said, you and I have known each other for a number of years. We were, I knew you when we were both teenagers, and then we both went to college at the same
That's right.
time. And then since then, we've stayed in touch, and we were getting married around the same time, having kids, all that kind of stuff. And
Absolutely.
so there was a lot.
Worked
And
with
then
your daughter for a short while.
you
Yeah.
worked
No.
with my daughter. I'm very sorry about that, but you did.
Well, I
Um,
still talk to you afterwards, even though
no,
I
that's
will say,
good. Well,
anyway, no.
healing is an amazing thing. No, she's great. But it's great because I know, when you come back in state, we get a chance to chat and get together, and we were pretty consistent about that when you were here for a while. And
Yeah,
I know one of the things that we get into when we talk about, I mean, just one, we definitely talk about education and the state of education.
for sure.
The
Yeah.
other thing we've talked about a lot of times is the state of men today,
Right.
especially in the church, in society, and to not even mince words, we know that men are really in rough shape. We know we've gotten beat up over the last 20, 30, 40 years, to the point of when a guy opens his mouth, he's mansplaining, or there's toxic,
Well,
or all this other stuff.
but and I think, and Rob, just to jump in on you there,
Yeah,
if I may,
absolutely.
the thing about this is the problem we're dealing with is not something that happened yesterday.
No.
It's not something, it's not, and therefore it's not going to be solved in a moment.
Right.
You've had, since before we were born, um, at least since kind of the Second World War, in many ways before then, um, has been this attack on those things which are kind of normal male virtues,
Right.
and they're not attacked in their aggregate. They're attacked in their specific moments. So what's happened is we find these caricatures of the male, kind of these secondary male characteristics. These the like the fact that we like sports, or we like running after chasing a ball around, or riding our
Right.
bikes, or driving our cars, or whatever we do. And what's attacked is not that; it's attacked the extreme, the guy who punishingly coaches,
Right.
the man who likes to work so hard that he ignores his family.
Right.
Um, Not the person who can appreciate a fine wine, but the person who is the alcoholic, and
Right.
who we rightly condemn these guys, right, for their bad behavior. But what happens is, we've seen this time and time again, is it's not really the guys so much that get condemned, although they do, but it's actually the characteristics that's related to it.
Right. Right.
So, and so what happens, we've done this now, especially to our kids, to our young boys, since before they were born, and kind of like what C.S. Lewis talks about um, in his famous story, the Man Without Chess. In this ghastly simplicity, we remove the organ and are shocked to find out that there's no function.
Right. Right. Yeah, and it's funny because you talk about that. Like I think one of the things I go a slightly different route as you're saying that is I think about when you turn on the TV or turn on a movie, where are the good male role models, right?
Right.
And like you said, there's definitely caricatures. What are the caricatures? All women are, all men are womanizers. All men ignore their children. They're not in touch with their wives, right? And I
Yep.
think you're right, because that's sometimes the only model that certain people have seen, you know. And it's very clear too that the other thing that has happened over the last number of years has been, you know, so you attack masculinity, and then also fathers are not present, where the kids don't grow up with a model of what a, and they could be in the home, they could be there,
Mhm.
but they could just not be present. So they get this, they see their own dad, they
Yeah,
see
yeah,
these
you're absolutely right.
caricatures, and they go, well, yeah, masculinity is just what a waste,
So
you
what's
know.
really interesting is that sociologically, and I know this from the education, that whereas women will, to a large degree, if left to their own devices, figure out much about being a woman, it's more hardwired than in a man. Certainly not nearly to the level they would if they had good female companionship and role modeling. Men do not.
Right.
Men do not. A boy who does not have a good, strong male model will not develop into a good, strong man.
Right. Right.
Or if they do, it'll be in such a small percentage that it's really almost not noticeable. Men need modeling. You and I both became young men because not only were our fathers good men, but we were surrounded by other
Yes.
men who were the same age or older than our fathers, who professed the same ideas that we had.
Yep. Yep.
Now, they didn't raise
Absolutely.
us, right? They didn't raise us. Our fathers raised us. But these men did it so that when I was at that age of my life where I'm exploring the world and trying to figure out what I'm going to do, I was surrounded by men who acted like men.
Yeah.
What I mean by that, these are guys who loved their spouses, who were faithful to them, right? Who were God-fearing, country-loving, wonderful guys who believed in hard work
Yep.
and who demanded it of us. Some of
Yep.
them were pleasant characters, some of them weren't that pleasant.
Yeah.
Right? We've all had those few guys. But the fact is,
100%.
but they, in the culture that you and I basically, the milieu we grew up in, had that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that is a piece, once it's cut out, it's lost for a long time unless God's grace comes back into it.
Well, and I even think about, like, I think about like relationship with my own dad, which is imperfect. Your relationship with your dad was imperfect, right? But they showed us, they demonstrated to us that, you know, the best that they could, what it is like to be a dad, a father, a husband, a man, right? They did that. Like you said, we were surrounded by people. I laugh because I just think of different circumstances where there were men that were great and some men that weren't. You know, I had a situation on a scout trip that I forgot a tent, and the scoutmaster really laid into me. And then there's this other guy, this other dad, who just very calmly goes and helps solve the problem and shows us how to handle it. And I'm like, you know, so you saw kind of both sides of that.
Well, you get the
Um,
contrast. Right.
yeah, and the other thing I was thinking about is, as you're talking about, you know, you and I growing up, I think about, I don't remember when I was a kid, and now they existed, I'm sure, but I don't remember that in the circles I ran, were there anybody that were divorced? I don't remember almost anybody. Was there anybody who, you know, single mothers, you know, people that were doing things on their own, or even, you know, blatantly like living together? You know, was there anybody? So even
Very few
that,
cases.
our kind of our immersion, our experience was that the family, we saw, at least whether they were perfect families or not, great marriages or great families or not, we saw a lot of families together, you know.
Yeah, I
And
can
I
only
think the
think
other thing,
I can
good.
only think of one or two cases of people that we knew who were divorced.
Yeah.
The only single parents we knew were typically widows,
Right.
um, and one widower, you know, who because of death found themselves in that position, obviously.
Right. Right. And that's a different situation. I mean,
And that's a whole different way.
right now, especially
But
with
here,
you in education, I'm sure you see families of, I mean, so many different states. Um, and
is
unfortunately, a lot of times what that, some of that comes down to the men shirking their duties. You know, they're not there for their families. They're not, you know, and I see it, I'm close to a more of an urban area. And, you know, with some of the people that we had, one of the women who came in and helped Karen for a number of years, I mean, you just see the culture and you just see what it is. The men just aren't there. You know, they
right
do what they
because
do. They get a woman pregnant and they disappear, and that's an extreme case. But we're not far off the mark in certain cases, unfortunately, which is not what masculinity is.
No,
Not at all.
and part of the issue what you're talking about is that there was a multifaceted attack on men and on good male characteristics.
Right.
This idea about being a governor, provider, and protector, kind of those three kind of characteristics of a man who would have been told when we were younger, that was reordered, right? So it was supposed to be you were a tyrant,
Yeah.
you were a miser, right? And you were a coward.
Right.
Like that's really what it says. You know, like you gotta wait for you're only doing it because the women are pushing you forward or something.
Right.
But at the same time, along comes this kind of this sexual liberation, right? Which then says you get a sex without consequence, and sex is just another activity.
Right.
And so instead of a man saying, I'm going to give up my freedom, I'm going to give up my ability to go and do my own thing in order to marry a woman, have children, and raise them, it's become, I can still do everything and I can have as much sex as I want. And, you know, and it's all going to be great.
Right.
And what's ended up happening is an utter disaster. I still remember Father Philip.
Oh yeah.
So he gave this talk when we were in college. I don't know if you recall this one, but we were in college and he kind of points to the campus and he says, Freud taught us that sex is happiness. If that were true, and he points to the campus, that campus should be ecstatic.
Right. Right. Yeah.
But we know it's not, because in fact, love, which is a very important thing to a man, sexual love, is found, it's found in fruition, or found in the best parts, when you're married to a woman who loves you.
Yep.
And you
Yep.
have the commitment.
Yep.
You know, and then what does this bring out? It brings out a family.
Right.
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 You know, the thing is this, a married man is anything but free.
Yeah. Yeah.
But as I said to a friend of mine, that's not so bad, because a draft horse not tied to a plow or a wagon is useless.
Right. Right. And I think it's funny you say that, because I'm sure people are going to cringe and go, "Oh my gosh, what do you mean free? Freedom is so." You know what? I was thinking about this as you were talking. You know, I can see these different steps in my life, the different things I've done to help me mature. Right. You know, you're a little kid, and even my thinking is not mature. And as you're in your 20s, there's levels that you're not mature. And I just think of all these different things, you know, dating Karen, getting engaged, getting married, having children, you know, and then certainly with her getting sick, all these different areas. And I just think about all of those ways that I matured. And as I was thinking about it, like, I matured as a man with that. You know, I matured and learned, and you know, I don't think I've felt more masculine as when I was fulfilling my job as husband and father. And I don't know. I mean, yes, you can say, okay, we can go out and climb mountains and we can go conquer things. I mean, that's also a very masculine thing to go do, is, you know, to do those types of things. But I just think about it. You're right. It's not necessarily free, but my gosh, it's fulfilling to know that that's how we're using the gift that we're given. And not only for our own family, but like you said, those guys who we interacted with, you know, they did it because that was culturally. But I know there were a number of guys that were there, you know, kind of coaches or scoutmasters or things like that, who taught me things, because that was what you did. You imparted it. You wanted these guys to know what it was like, what life was like, and what was coming up, you know. And I think a lot of that is so lost right now, because I think everybody, the individualism is one, like you said, men just shirking the responsibilities, and people just not caring. People just, it doesn't really matter, you know, and everybody's the same. It doesn't matter, you know. And I mean, we could get into the whole thing on gender, which I don't want to get into that one, but that's a whole different thing. But I guess the question I'll ask you is, what should masculine look like? What should masculinity be? What's a good model of a man, at least in your opinion?
Right. So the thing is, I think one of the pieces to kind of start a little bit in the negative side is about what it should not be, or what it doesn't have to be.
Right.
A strong man is not necessarily the firefighter, the Marine, the mechanic, the dock worker, the rough, tough man. Like,
right.
Some men are built for that, right? Some men are built to be lumberjacks. Many are not. Some are built to be greengrocers, and some are built to be bankers and all.
Right. And
So I
lawyers,
think
and
that
yeah, absolutely.
I think that the first piece about a man is that a man is one who's got is a male, obviously, perhaps not obviously, but it's someone who has those characteristics or those character traits, which have virtue in them.
Okay.
So it really boils down to a man of virtue is the only kind of man there's going to be.
Okay.
Now you can also say a woman of virtue also.
Of course.
We're not,
Of
but,
course. We're
but
talking
particularly
specifically
about,
about men, though. We could say the same thing from that as for women.
Right.
Of course.
But so you want a man who is honest, right? A person who is honest, a person who is patient, who is kind, right? Who is generous, who has fortitude, who can withstand an insult because he knows who he is. This is what a man, can be. Amazingly, or ironically, these are the same characteristics of God.
Right.
Right. And one of the things, and I get in trouble for saying this, but I've noticed that I don't ever see in Scripture that God is nice. Right?
No, you're right.
He's kind, loving, patient, thoroughly cares about us. It's just not very nice.
Right.
Right.
And, right. I'm not sure that the word, now you can tell me differently because you know more than I do. I'm not sure that the word nice even appears in Scripture anywhere.
I never found it.
Yeah, I don't believe it does.
And I don't think God is fair either.
Right.
Because I've never seen, a God of fairness and niceness.
Right. No, you're right. And what's funny is you're saying that too. I'm thinking the other things that are characteristics of a man and a characteristic of God, right? Righteous anger, right? People say, well, anger is all bad. No, it's not.
No.
Not if there's righteous anger that we use, I also think of initiative. I also think as men being ones. Now, not everybody's an extrovert and not everybody's a leader. We get that. But all of us as men have to take initiative in the areas that we need to take initiative in, right? I believe, and you can, I believe that a very passive man is not living out his masculinity because he's waiting and waiting. And I've had this discussion with a number of other guys. And then certainly I think the word that I think would sum most of it up is, like you even said, the word love, right? Yeah. But the way men love and the way women love are going to be very different.
Right.
And I think it's interesting. I remember we were meeting a number of years ago talking about what more can we do for men in the area. And Brother Patrick from the Brotherhood, I thought this was great. I don't know if he stole it or not, but I'm stealing it from him. He goes, what the perfect model of a man for us is Jesus, because he was tough when he needed to be tough and tender when he needed to be tender.
Yeah.
And when you look at the different models, when you see the different interactions that he has, he's tender with people, when they come to him, when they need healing, when they need guidance, when they need counsel. But when people are giving him a hard time, or he realizes that he needs to put a challenge out to them, he does. And he doesn't hold back, and that's the other thing. You said, you never see where God is nice. I think what we want to look at is the Jesus of like loveliness and shepherd and sitting in the field and feeding people. Right. That's not who Jesus, let alone Jesus also sacrificed his entire life for all of us, which is, like you said, masculinity is not free. We're not free. A father's, because we need to sacrifice our life for those around us.
Right.
And that's whether we're a single man, a father, a grandfather, whatever, that's our life, is to lay down our lives for those around us. One, bring others to Jesus, but just for the good of the others.
Precisely, Rob.
Yeah.
The thing about for men is that if we are not living for others, if we're not focused outside ourselves, we have a hard time understanding what we are to do. It doesn't mean men aren't introspective, and you can't be introspective.
Right, that's different. Yeah.
But men do spend most of their times seeking. Like relationships with God, you can passively receive God. But the fact is, we know that we do best when we seek after God, when we try to meet God. Now, God does the vast majority of the work, but we open up ourselves to him by saying we will want it. we want it. Like, I do think God calls men to kneel before him, literally kneel before the crucifix, before our Lord in the Blessed
Right.
Sacrament, and to open up our hearts to him and say, take, Lord, receive everything. Because no man is freer than the man who is doing what he's supposed to do.
Right. Right.
You know, it's like when you look at any kind of, I was thinking about on a boat, right? A boat can float wherever, but a boat is freest when it's being rowed, because then it can
Right.
go where it's supposed to, right? It goes where you want it to go.
Right.
It takes effort to get it. Everything good in life takes effort.
Right. Well, it's like, and people use the model too of like, you're going to plant a vegetable garden and you just kind of let it go. You put in a whole bunch of tomatoes. You never weed it. You never hoe it. You never put fertilizer around it and all this kind of stuff. You might get some tomatoes. You're going to do a much better job if you take care of that garden. And that's us. And people, well, you don't want to use that analogy. We're not tomato plants. No, but there is, for us having to be disciplined, for us having to be, to look sometimes and do, I'm going to do what's right, not what's easy.
Right.
And I think that's, and like you said, you get passive men or you get guys that are only living for themselves. Unfortunately, that's what everybody's told to do right now. Everybody lives on their phone or lives on their iPad and, watches 8 episodes of something a night. And I wonder, those folks, is their life fulfilling? Right. And especially for men, we need to be doing more than that. There's times, we both know it's fine. Take a night, watch a movie, hang out, do whatever. That's fine. Play video games or whatever we're doing.
Yeah, right.
But that, unfortunately, what that's become the goal of so many guys' lives, because they don't have a purpose. They don't have a mission, and they don't know where to find one. They don't know they need one, and they don't know where to find one, which is unfortunately why church attendance is down.
Well, but here, I don't get into church attendance, but
Yeah.
part of the thing I think you're hitting there is men want a challenge. A good, healthy man wants a challenge. He wants to be challenged. He wants to be pushed as hard as can be so he can find out who he is. Part of the great process of being a man is this discovery of who you are. And you find out by who you are by really exploring outside yourself. So for instance, there's a famous case back in the 1970s. The Marines were having trouble recruiting the right kind of people.
Okay.
So an old Marine told me the story. He says, so what we did was we upped the ante. We made it harder for you to get into the Marines. It used to be
they made it harder. They made it harder to get in the Marines.
Yes.
Okay.
They said it used to be 50 push-ups, now it became 100. It used to be 10 chin-ups, now it became 20. It was harder to get into the Marines. And the number of recruits went up.
Wow.
In our society, I think the church makes a mistake by trying to be too easy.
Right.
Like, you think about this, if, we're Catholics and we receive Jesus. Like, the fact is, we receive God himself.
Yep.
It's not a casual moment. And in our lifetimes, we've seen it become more and more casual. I think one of the reasons why people like the traditional form of Mass, and I don't mean to be in favor of it or positive, I think it's good for people who enjoy it, who feel called to it. But one of the reasons is you don't casually go to traditional Mass.
Right. Right. Right.
That alone is a big deal.
Yeah.
Like the idea that, I don't know, you remember when we were kids, everybody would put on their Sunday best.
Absolutely.
Right. You go to mass, you have if you're a little kid, you have your shirt and tie. Dad always wore a suit jacket, mom always came in a pretty dress. Like, it was a big deal. You didn't casually go to Mass.
Right. Right. And the other thing is,
Mass.
everybody else was in the same, like everybody else was doing the same thing.
Right.
Was that everybody was coming in, all the dads had ties on. All the moms were, dressed up, all the kids were in good shape, I mean, of course, when Mass ended and you're a little kid, you couldn't wait to get home and put on your shorts and t-shirt,
Yeah, absolutely.
But you learned that it was not just, I'm not going to a movie, you know? And unfortunately, I've seen that here recently. Both of us unfortunately have. You go to certain churches and before and after Mass, it's like a social. people aren't treating it as the sacred space that it is. And then the other thing I saw a number of years ago is at church, you walk in, first off, I remember being a kid, and most times there's more women than men at church events. You go, okay, why is that? And then the men, even the men that are there, they're not engaged. They're not really present, and I think we're on it all ties together. Absolutely. And I think I agree with you. I don't think that the men see church, see mass, see for what it is. I can just close that real quick, and we're gonna have to end here shortly. But
Yes,
I don't think men see that for what it is. So let me ask you a question, since we only have a couple of minutes left. What do we do going forward? How do we as just Tim and Rob address what's going on now specifically with men?
I think there's a couple things we can do, but the first piece I think we should do is steal something from the old liberal line, which is think globally and act locally.
Okay.
And I do think part of the way we do it is by, amongst those around us, we encourage these kind of virtues.
Right. Absolutely.
I think it's actually the first thing is we want to fix the world. We got to fix it in our neighborhoods.
I'm gonna add one first thing, which you're assuming, but I'm gonna say it so it's said. We need to be men of prayer. Yes. Because we absolutely need to submit ourselves to the Lord on a daily basis. For us as Catholics, get to daily mass, pray the rosary, lead our families. So before we even do that, we need to be connected to our Father.
Right, because I think
continuing to train us and love us.
Absolutely. And I think part of this thing I was saying, which dovetails on what you're saying, Rob, is the answer to all of our problems is found in front of the Blessed Sacrament.
Yep.
It's going to be found. I was just listening to a little blurb from a retired U.S. Navy SEAL who said he always pulls out his rosaries. He says, always keep my rosaries in my left pocket. And so I said, why do you keep your rosaries in your left? First off, you're a Navy SEAL and you pray the rosary every day.
Right.
But he goes, well, because that's where the old knights would keep their sword is on their left side.
Right.
You reach your left side to pull the sword out. So this guy who went in mortal danger to protect our country says the rosary every day.
Yep. Brings the weapon with him. Yeah.
Brings the weapon. So, I take for example, Rob, I get up every morning and the first thing I do, once I get the coffee started, is I say a rosary for my family and for my things. Before I look at my phone, before I turn on a computer, before I look at anything, I typically sit in the dark and say the rosary. And I found that every day when I start it that way is a much better day.
Oh yeah. I start the day with prayer. I try to get to daily mass as much as I can. Again, we're not patting ourselves on the back, but you and I both know the need for that. You and I both know that this is, when we realize that we can't keep doing this on our own, right? So we know that we need to be men of prayer. I think you're right. Think globally, act locally. We need to model for the men around us, for the women around us too.
Right.
What is it like to be a man when you need to do something difficult? I think the other thing I'll add to that is not just model and live it, but I think we need mentors. All of us need somebody that we're talking to. I don't know how being, either a man or a woman where you don't have an older brother, older sister, mentor, coach, whatever you want to call it, that you can talk to and ask questions of. I think that's all part of it, right? I think that the modeling and I think the mentoring and all those types of things. And then what that involves, though, is going back to what we said. It takes men to say yes, that I'm going to do this. I'm not just going to sit at home and watch Netflix. There's an opportunity for me to go help out at Scouts or at a softball team or at my church to be there.
I think you're hitting upon something, Rob, which is important to note, is that it requires, as you said, it requires action.
Yep.
It's like a man. Men are supposed to be comfortable with the physical world. It doesn't mean that you are a log splitting lumberjack, right?
Right.
It might mean it, but it means that you're comfortable being out in the world, dealing with those things around you. Men are supposed to be inviting younger men and other men into the world that they have. And that's part of our job.
Correct.
Part of our job is not to keep this a secret, but to open it up.
Right.
God uses the craziest of people to ignite fires.
Look at us. That we're living proof. Who the heck would have put us in the spots that we're in?
There's one point I have to say about this, because we look at our current world and we go, my gosh, this is terrible. We're in a pickle, right? When John Vianney, the Cure de Ars, went to Ars, there was like something like 6 or 7 dance halls open and a church that nobody went to.
Right.
But because he acted like a man and he did what he was supposed to do, by the time he died, all those dance halls had closed and the church was full.
Yep.
In France, right after the French Revolution, something along the lines of 90% of the clergy had been killed or driven off. The churches had been condemned and grabbed, and there was no faith in the eldest daughter of the church. 100 years later, it was all back.
Yep. No, and we have to wrap up. Well, I'll end on this. I think we can look around, and I think I do, and we can finish each with a statement or two. I think I can look around and go, you know what? Oh my gosh, this is a hopeless situation. It's not hopeless. No. It's not. There are men that are stepping up. There are people that are stepping in, and the Lord has done a lot more with less.
Yeah.
So, which I think,
I think ultimately, if this is reliant upon the two of us, our friends, it's over. There's no chance. But it's reliant upon God. I was thinking the other day, I went to a funeral and they played "For You Are My God,"
right?
That song, and they had a wonderful. And I was struck by the lines that said, "You are my God, for you are long. Defend me, O Lord."
Yep.
So, in this case, who will ride with our armies? God.
Yep.
Who will go to war for us? God.
Yep. Who is our loving Father, who wants nothing more for us than what a loving Father wants. So, Tim, thank you. Thank you so much.
Pleasure,
this is a great. You and I both know we could go for 3 hours, but I don't think anybody wants to watch a 3-hour video. But I'll definitely have you come back. So thank you, Tim. Really appreciate it, guys. If you can, like and subscribe. Please leave comments. If you hated this video, let us know. If you loved it, let us know. That'll affect what we put out next. Thanks.
That's right. Question, cares, comments, or concerns.
That's right.